The sky is a painful crystalline blue. The world is painted in extremes. The blinding white of high-elevation snow and the dark, jagged granite of the Wind River Range. It is beautiful and it is empty. This is where you come to disappear. A man moves through this emptiness. Jack Stone. He is 30-something, but his eyes carry the flat, tired assessment of a much older soul. He wears a faded canvas jacket, jeans, and worn boots, a uniform of civilian anonymity, but he doesn't move like a civilian. A civilian hikes. Jack patrols. His feet make no sound on the needle-covered earth. His gaze never rests. It sweeps logs and analyzes. A broken branch. A displaced rock. The distant thermal signature of a deer herd. He is on convalescent leave. The official term. It meant the doctors, the brass, and the shrinks all agreed. The last operation in the Badlands of Afghanistan had broken something in him. They told him to find peace, so he came here, to the one place on earth that was just as silent and unforgiving as his own mind. He is not alone. Moving just ahead of him is Kodiak. Kodiak is a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois. To a civilian, a shepherd. To the men Jack served with, he is MWD K121, military working dog. He is 70 pounds of hair-covered muscle, with teeth that can punch through body armor and a nose that can smell a change in the human heart. He is also the only living being Jack Stone trusts with his life. Jack stops, leaning against a lodgepole pine. The cold air bites at the scar tissue on his left leg, a sharp, familiar ache. He watches Kodiak work. The dog isn't playing. He, too, is patrolling, quartering the terrain, his nose sifting through the terabytes of information carried on the wind. Sagebrush, pine, elk, and something else. Jack has been watching the dog for an hour, noticing the subtle shift. Kodiak has been noseblind to the abundant wildlife. He's been tracking a human scent, hours old, but persistent. This deep in the backcountry, that's not a good sign. The bond between a handler and his canine, especially one forged in combat, is something profound. It's a connection that goes beyond words, built on thousands of hours of training and a shared willingness to walk into the dark. It is the kind of loyalty that anchors a man when everything else has been stripped away. It's why we are so drawn to these stories, the pure, unfiltered courage of an animal partner. This is the very essence of what we explore on our channel. Courageous Paw. We're dedicated to telling the stories of these incredible canines and their handlers, the silent heroes who protect us at home and abroad. If you believe in that mission, and you want to see more stories of loyalty and bravery, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button. It helps us honor them, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Kodiak stops dead. It's not a dramatic movie bark. It's a signal, subtle and chilling. His body freezes, a sculpture of coiled power. His head lowers. His ears lock forward. A single puff of hot air escapes his nostrils. He's found the source. Jack is off the tree, moving parallel to the dog, his hand reflexively dropping to the space on his hip where his sidearm should be. It isn't. He's on leave. He's finding peace. He carries only a K-bar utility knife on his belt and the heavy weight of his experience. Kodiak gives a low woof, a sound that isn't a growl but a warning. Here. Threat. Jack unclips the heavy-duty leather leash from his belt but doesn't attach it. He trusts the dog's discipline. He gives a silent hand signal, forward, slow. They crest a small ridge. The vast wilderness gives way to a pocket of civilization, if you could call it that. A small, weather-beaten ranch house sits in a lonely valley, its paint peeling under the harsh Wyoming sun. An old, rusted-out Ford F-150 is parked near a collapsing barn, but it's the new truck that has Kodiak's attention. A shiny black Dodge Ram 3500, aggressively new with tinted windows and obnoxious tires. It's parked at a careless angle, blocking the ranch's only driveway. 3 men. They are local, not city. They wear the regional uniform of insulated flannel, denim, and barely contained resentment. They have Sarah, 30s, cornered against the porch rail. She's thin, tough as jerky, and holding her ground, but her eyes are wide with panic. Hiding behind her, clutching her jacket, is her son. Khoisaid. I told you we're not interested. Sarah's voice is strained, trying to project strength she doesn't feel. The leader, a big man with a thick neck and a mean little smile, steps onto the porch. He's holding a sheaf of legal-looking papers. See, Sarah, that's where you're wrong. The man drawls, his voice a mockery of neighborly concern. Your late husband, bless his heart, left you in a real bind. These signatures. They just make the bind go away. For you and the boy. He isn't asking. He's telling. He shoves the papers toward her. Sign it. No, Cody, the boy whispers from behind her. The man's smile vanishes. What did you say, kid? He said no, Sarah snaps, pushing the papers away. Get off my property now. The man's temper flashes. He grabs her arm. You listen to me, you stupid. Jack has seen enough. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He just steps out from the tree line, Kodiak at a perfect heel position beside him. The three men freeze. Their bravado evaporates. They weren't expecting company. Especially not company that looks like Jack, and definitely not company that looks like Kodiak. Kodiak hasn't moved a muscle, but his presence has sucked all the oxygen out of the air. He is staring at the hand grabbing Sarah's arm. That's a big dog, one of the other men stammers, taking a half step back. The leader, caught, tries to recover. He lets go of Sarah. This is private business, friend. Best you and your mutt move along. Jack looks at Sarah. He looks at Cody. Then his gaze settles on the leader. He doesn't respond. He just stands there, a 200-pound problem they didn't account for. I said, the leader growls, trying to reclaim his dominance. Get out of here. He takes a step toward Jack. Jack gives a single one-word command spoken in a calm, almost conversational tone. Watch. Kodiak explodes. It's not an attack. It's an application of force. Before the man can even register the movement, Kodiak has closed the 10-foot distance. He doesn't go for the throat. He doesn't maul. He leaps, twists in midair, and clamps his jaws with surgical precision onto the man's right biceps, the same arm he used to grab Sarah. The man screams. It's a high, thin sound. Kodiak doesn't tear or shake. He just holds his jaws locked. A perfect, non-lethal pain compliance hold. The other two men are frozen in terror. Jack moves. His motion is a blur of cold efficiency. He takes 2 steps, seizes the second man's wrist, and applies a simple joint lock. The man's knees buckle with a wet snap. The third man, seeing this, raises his hands. I'm good. I'm good. We're going! Get in the truck, Jack says. His voice is the first thing they've heard from him, and it's as cold as the wind. The leader is sobbing, pleading with the dog. Get him off! Get him off! Jack looks at him. You done? Yes, yes. God, yes. Jack gives another one-word command. Out. Kodiak releases his hold instantly, landing on all fours, a single drop of the man's blood on his black muzzle. He takes 2 steps back to Jack's heel, his body still tense, ready. The 3 men scramble, falling over each other to get into their shiny truck. The leader, clutching his arm, throws the truck in reverse, digs up the yard, and spins gravel as he flees. In the sudden, ringing silence, the only sound is the truck's engine fading into the distance. Sarah is breathing hard, her hand over her mouth. Cody peeks out from behind her, his eyes wide, no longer scared but in awe. Jack Stone hasn't moved. He watches the dust settle on the empty road. He looks at the papers the man dropped, scattered on the porch. He looks at Sarah. His peace had lasted exactly 4 days. The silence that rushed in to replace the sound of the fleeing truck was heavy and absolute. The dust settled on the gravel driveway, coating the scattered papers. For a long moment, nobody moved. Sarah remained pressed against the porch rail, her chest heaving, the adrenaline draining away to leave a cold, shaky dread. Cody, still hiding behind her, finally peeked out, his knuckles white where he gripped her jacket. Jack Stone said nothing. He watched the empty stretch of road where the truck had disappeared, his head slightly tilted, listening. Kodiak, his duty done, broke his rigid heel and sat, panting lightly, his gaze fixed on the strangers. Finally, Sarah pushed herself upright. Her toughness was a native Wyoming trait, annealed by hardship, and it was returning fast. You shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice trembling but hard. Jack turned his gaze to her. It was a flat, assessing look. They were assaulting you. They'll be back, she stated. It wasn't a guess. It was a fact. They'll be back and they'll be worse. Who are they? Sarah walked over and angrily snatched the discarded papers from the porch floor. She held them out. They were damp and dirty. Thorn developments. They've been trying to buy this place since my husband, since David died. Jack took the papers, a standard lowball offer, a deed of sale, aggressive but legal. You don't want to sell. A bitter laugh escaped her. Sell? This ranch has been in David's family for 3 generations. We are this land. We don't sell it. She looked past Jack toward the mountains that held the setting sun. David told them no, 100 times. He told them to go to hell, and, Jack pressed, his voice quiet, demanding, and, Sarah's voice broke, the grief and anger mixing into a toxic brew. 3 months ago, he was checking fences up on the North Ridge. The tractor, his tractor, a machine he knew better than his own hands. It rolled. They called it an accident, a freak accident. Jack's eyes never left hers. He'd seen this look before, in Mosul, in the Peck Valley. It was the look of someone who had been handed a lie so big they were forced to swallow it, even as it choked them. Ever since the funeral, it's been this. She waved her hand at the yard. The lawyers. The calls. Then the friendly visits from those men. This was the first time they... She didn't need to finish. Jack looked from the mother to the son. He saw the isolation. The nearest neighbor was miles away. The local sheriff was either bought or useless. They were alone. He folded the papers and handed them back to her. You should go inside. Make some coffee. Sarah stared at him, confused by the mundane request. What? Coffee, he repeated. And locked the door. I need to check your perimeter. He wasn't asking permission. He and Kodiak moved as one, disappearing around the side of the barn, swallowed by the encroaching dusk. An hour later, Jack re-entered the house through the back kitchen door, which he found unlocked. He locked it behind him. Sarah was at the stove, pouring black coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. The small house was clean, organized, but strained. It smelled of coffee and old wood. On the mantel, a framed photo showed Sarah smiling next to a capable-looking man in a cowboy hat. David. Jack saw the ghost that haunted him. He saw the face of an interpreter in Helmand, a good man who had trusted Jack's team. A man who was ambushed and executed with his family. After Jack's team was forced to pull out, he had failed to protect them. He had followed orders and left them to die. This was the same pattern. The same predators. A different battlefield. He took the mug from Sarah. They cut the phone line, but they used a pinch clamp, sloppy. They wanted you to find it. It's a psychological tool to make you feel cut off. He'd already respliced it. Sarah sat down hard at the small kitchen table. So what now? You can't stay. You saw them. This isn't your fight. They'll be back, Jack said, repeating her own words. But not tonight. You embarrassed them. They'll have to report their failure. The next move will be different. It won't be those 3. It'll be the mid-level boss, Sarah said, using her late husband's term. Marcus Thorne. The one in the city. The one who signs the checks. Jack nodded. His leave was over. This was the work. It was always the work. Cody, who had been watching from the hallway, crept into the room. His fear of the men was gone, replaced by a profound curiosity. He was staring at Kodiak. Kodiak, who had been in a perfect downstay by the door, watched the boy. Is he mean? Cody whispered. Jack looked at the dog, then at the boy. He's not mean. He's trained. There's a difference. Jack gave a low verbal command. At ease. Kodiak's entire posture changed. The tension left him. He let out a low woof and rested his head on his paws, though his eyes remained alert. Cody stepped closer. Can I? Jack nodded. Cody slowly extended a hand. Kodiak sniffed it, then gave a single, quick lick. Cody giggled, a sound that felt alien in the tense room. He sat on the floor, his hand resting on the dog's powerful back. Jack looked at Sarah. I'm going for a walk. I'll be back before dawn. A walk where? To find out what they really want. He looked at Kodiak, who instantly lifted his head, ready. No, Jack said to the dog. He pointed at the boy. Watch him, watch. The K9 understood. It was a transfer of command. The dog got up, walked over to Cody, and lay down between the boy and the front door, facing it. Sarah watched the exchange, her breath catching. For the first time since David's death, an ounce of the crushing weight on her chest lifted. She wasn't alone. Jack checked the simple utility knife on his belt. It was all he had. It was all he needed. He slipped out the back door, a ghost vanishing into the cold Wyoming night. The moon was a sliver, offering just enough light for a man who knew how to use it. Jack moved up the ridge, using the shadows of the pines as his highway. He wasn't tracking the men. He was tracking the purpose. The thugs had come from the northeast. The accident had happened on the North Ridge. The threat was coming from one direction. He moved for 2 hours, covering ground that would take a normal hiker half a day. He was high up, looking down into the valley that bordered Sarah's property when he smelled it. Diesel exhaust. He dropped, crawling the last 50 yards to a rocky outcrop. He pulled a small monocular from his jacket pocket. Below him was a small, self-contained city. It wasn't a resort. It wasn't a ski lift. It was a full-scale, high-tech geology camp. 3 massive sound-baffled generators powered a bank of floodlights, illuminating a drilling rig. Tents were set up in a military-style grid, and it was guarded. Jack watched. These weren't the 3 morons from the truck. These were professionals. 4 men wearing identical black tactical gear, carrying short-barreled rifles, were patrolling the perimeter. They moved with purpose. They used night vision. This was not Thorn Developments. This was something else entirely. Jack moved, circling the camp, a shadow among shadows. He needed to know what they were drilling for. He found his answer near a slag heap away from the main camp. Discarded core samples. Dozens of them. He pulled one from the pile, a long, thin cylinder of rock. He angled it in the moonlight. Even in the dim light he saw it. The telltale streaks. The metallic blue-black gleam. He'd seen this before, guarding VIPs at a mine in the Congo. It wasn't gold. It wasn't oil. It was rare earth minerals. Neodymium. Lithium. The lifeblood of the 21st century. The ingredients for every phone, every electric car, every satellite, and every guided missile. And this valley, David's Valley, was sitting on a motherlode. Sarah's ranch wasn't just in the way, it was the key. It either held the richest part of the deposit, or controlled the only viable access road for heavy equipment. This wasn't a land grab. It was a corporate war, and Marcus Thorne had just brought in a professional army. Jack slipped the core sample into his pocket and began the silent, rapid journey back. He knew with absolute certainty that this was no longer a local dispute. He'd just stumbled into a fight that was way above Sarah's head, and way above his own pay grade. He arrived back at the ranch as the first hint of gray light touched the eastern sky. He entered the kitchen. Sarah was asleep in the chair, the shotgun across her lap. At the foot of Cody's bed, Kodiak's head lifted from his paws. A silent, all clear passed between them. Jack stood in the quiet house, the weight of the rock in his pocket. He now knew the truth. And he knew that the non-violent attacks, the lawyers, the frozen bank accounts were about to begin. Marcus Thorne was not a patient man, but he was a pragmatic one. He sat in a glass-walled office in Jackson, Wyoming, 100 miles from the dirt and sagebrush reality of the ranch. The view from his window was of pristine, snow-capped mountains, a postcard for the investors he charmed. He was on the phone, listening to the whining excuses of the lead thug, the one with the punctured biceps. I'm telling you, it wasn't just a dog, boss. It was a monster. And the guy, he just broke your arm, Thorne finished, his voice dangerously smooth. He was looking at a file on his computer screen. The file he'd pulled the moment he got the call. You and 2 other men who I pay for physical intimidation were neutralized by 1 man and his pet. Boss, he wasn't normal. He was like a ghost. Thorne's eyes scanned the file. Jack Stone, convalescent leave, U.S. Navy. The file was thin, heavily redacted, which told Thorne everything he needed to know. He wasn't a ghost, Thorne said, a cold smile touching his lips. He was a SEAL. He hung up on the man's sputtering. Thorne leaned back in his Eames chair. This changed the equation. He had sent blunt instruments to do a delicate job, and they had run into a scalpel. He respected that. But it didn't matter. A SEAL, off base and on medical leave, was a warrior without an army. He was a professional, which meant he understood rules of engagement. Thorne, on the other hand, was about to switch to a battlefield where Jack Stone's rules didn't apply. He wasn't going to send more muscle. He was going to send the system. He picked up the phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his private banker. The second was to a consultant on the county payroll. Mr. Thorne, the county man answered, his voice obsequious. Jim, I have a situation on that ranch we discussed. The widow. It appears she has a new house guest, an unstable transient male, and a dangerous animal. Thorne listened. Yes, I'm very concerned for the child. Activate the file. Yes, today. He hung up and swiveled his chair to face the mountains. The fight was over. Jack Stone just didn't know it yet. The morning at the ranch began with a fragile, toxic silence. Sarah had not slept. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the shotgun while Cody, in an act of pure childhood faith, had fallen asleep on a floor mattress, his hand buried in Kodiak's thick fur. Jack stood at the window drinking the last of the black coffee. He had shown Sarah the core sample. He had laid out the truth in the harsh pre-dawn light. This wasn't a land dispute. It was a resource war. My God, Sarah had whispered, touching the rock. This is why, David. They didn't. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. The realization had settled over her, not as a shock, but as a final, crushing weight. They'll be back, Jack said. Then we fight, she said, her voice hard. I'll call Sheriff Brody. He was a friend of David's. Wait, Jack said. He held up a hand. Let's see who he works for. That proved to be a problem. Sarah picked up the phone's handset. The dial tone was gone. It's dead, she said, panic rising. You said you fixed it? I did, Jack said, his voice flat. He went outside, Kodiak at his heel, and checked the junction box. The line wasn't just cut. It was gone. A 20-foot section had been expertly ripped from the poles leading down the road. They were here, he said, returning to the kitchen. While we were talking. They're boxing us in. It doesn't matter, Sarah said, her resolve hardening. I'll use my cell. I'll drive to the ridge and get a signal. And I'll call my lawyer in Cheyenne. He'll know what to do. She grabbed her phone and her purse. She went to her laptop on the kitchen counter, logged into her bank. I need to transfer him the retainer. She stopped. The screen was flashing a bright, sterile red. Account access restricted. Please contact your branch manager. What? She tried again. The same message, Sarah, Jack said, looking over her shoulder. What's the bank? Wyoming Trust, why? Jack pointed to the letterhead on the threatening but legal papers from the day before. The Thorne Developments logo was right next to the logo for Wyoming Trust. They were partners. They didn't cut the phone line to stop you from calling the sheriff, Jack said, the pieces clicking into place. They cut it to stop you from calling the bank. The blood drained from Sarah's face. My accounts, my money. It's all frozen, Jack finished. Pending a state review, it's a clean legal move. They've cut you off. Sarah sank into the chair. No money, no phone, no lawyer, no gas for the truck. They were an island. And then, Kodiak growled. It wasn't the threat growl. It was a low, alert rumble. Jack looked out the window. A white county-issued sedan was bumping its way up the long driveway. It parked, and a woman in a severe pantsuit got out holding a clipboard. Who is that? Sarah whispered. That, Jack said, his stomach tightening, is the enemy I can't fight. The woman knocked. She was polite, professional, and held all the power. Mrs. Miller? I'm Eileen Albright, from the Wyoming Department of Family Services. May I come in? She didn't wait for an answer, stepping just inside the doorway. Her eyes did a rapid scan. The shotgun on the table, the strange man, Jack, the child sleeping on the floor, and the dog. Ma'am, we received an anonymous but credible tip regarding the welfare of your son, Cody. A tip? Sarah said, bewildered. He's fine. We're fine. The tip mentioned instability, Ms. Albright said, her pen making a note. It mentioned a volatile man on the premises and an attack dog. Her gaze landed on Kodiak. Kodiak, sensing the tension, had risen to his feet. He was standing silently between Ms. Albright and Cody. A perfect defensive posture. That's him, Cody said, suddenly awake and proud. That's Kodiak. He saved us. Ms. Albright's expression tightened. Saved you from whom? From the bad men. So you confirm there was violence, Ms. Albright said, scribbling. Ma'am, is this your dog? He's with me, Jack said. Ms. Albright turned her full bureaucratic attention on him. And you are a friend. A friend who brought a trained, high-prey drive animal into a home with a small child? Is this animal certified? Vaccinated? He's a service animal, Jack said, his words like stone. Is he? She challenged. Because the report I received said this dog mauled a man yesterday. A man who I am told is pressing charges. This was the trap. The thugs weren't just thugs. They were witnesses. That's not what happened. Sarah jumped in. They were attacking us. That dog, ma'am? Ms. Albright cut her off, her voice like ice. All I see is a child in a high-stress environment, a firearm left in the open, and an animal trained for violence. I'm going to have to make a full report. A judge may have to rule on temporary custody for the child's safety. She was threatening to take Cody. It was a cold, brutal, and brilliant checkmate. Sarah let out a small, broken sound. This was worse than the thugs. This was worse than the bank. They were using her son against her. Jack stood there, his hands clenched into fists. He was a man of action, a man who solved problems by meeting them head-on. But how do you fight a clipboard? How do you neutralize a report? He could kill a man from 1,000 yards, but he was utterly, completely powerless against this 50-year-old woman in a pantsuit. He looked at Kodiak, the greatest asset on his team, and he realized that, in this new battle, Marcus Thorne had just turned his dog into his single greatest liability. Eileen Albright, the CPS agent, left a silence in her wake that was more profound than any threat of violence. She had been polite, she had been professional, and she had delivered a kill stroke. She gave Sarah 24 hours to voluntarily surrender the animal to a state facility, or she would return with a court order and a sheriff's deputy to remove Cody. The threat hung in the air, thick and toxic. Sarah collapsed at the small kitchen table, the facade of her ranch wife toughness finally crumbling. This was the blow she couldn't parry. They had found the joint in her armor. She wasn't a landowner fighting for a legacy anymore. She was a mother, and they had just put a gun to her son's head. Maybe I should just sign the papers, she whispered, the words sounding like a betrayal. Maybe if I give them the land, they'll leave us alone. Jack stood by the window, his back to her. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He was a man built to stop tanks, and he had just been disarmed by a piece of paper. The CPS agent, the frozen bank account, the cut phone line. It was a tactical three-pronged assault. Clean, cold, and brutally effective. His solution, his intervention, had made everything worse. He had given Thorne the unstable transient and the dangerous animal he needed to build his case. No, Jack said, his voice a low growl. You sign, you lose. You lose. They still have to clean up the loose ends. And where the loose ends? Then what, Jack? She cried, her voice cracking. What do we do? You can't shoot a social worker. You can't intimidate a bank. We're done, he turned. His eyes were cold, not with anger, but with a sudden, chilling clarity. You're right. I can't. This is their world, their rules. So we get someone who can tear their world down. He walked past her, out the front door, Kodiak shadowing his every step. He went to his dusty Ford pickup truck, the one civilian thing he owned. He reached under the driver's seat, pressing a hidden release. A panel in the floor dropped, revealing a small, hardened Pelican case. He brought it inside and set it on the table. What is that? Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. An insurance policy. He opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a high-frequency iridium satellite phone. You're a soldier, Sarah breathed. I was, Jack said. He powered it on. The phone whirred, searching for a signal. Right now, I'm just a guy making a call. He had one number in the phone's memory, saved under the name Ghost. He hit send. It rang twice. A voice answered, sharp and alert, sounding like it was in a server room. You're not supposed to use this line. Ghost, you active? Jack said, cutting through the pleasantries. There was a pause. Stone? Jesus, man. You're supposed to be in Wyoming learning how to fish. Don't tell me you're in trouble. I'm compromised, Jack said. Wind River Range. I'm digitally dark. I need a footprint and I need it now. Who's the target? Ghost's voice was all business, a corporation. Thorne Developments. And a county-level CPS agent, Eileen Albright. I need leverage. I need anything. I need it yesterday. Thorne. Jack could hear rapid typing. That rings a bell. Not a good one. Okay, I'm in. Give me 60 minutes to light them up. And Stone, try not to start a war before I call you back. Too late, Jack said, and disconnected. 100 miles away, Marcus Thorne was pouring himself a celebratory scotch. The call from his man in the sheriff's office confirmed the CPS agent had made her visit. The widow was trapped. The seal was neutered. It was a beautiful, clean, non-violent solution. He was admiring the amber liquid in his crystal glass when his computer screen flickered. A small, black dialog box appeared in the center of his multi-thousand-dollar display. System warning, unauthorized packet injection, level 5. Thorne froze. He wasn't a tech guy, but he knew what that meant. His firewall, which he paid 6 figures a year to maintain, had just been breached. The warning disappeared. His screen flickered again. His mouse moved on its own, opening his private files. It opened his encrypted bank transfers. It opened his calendar. It was moving with an intelligent, terrifying speed. His phone rang. It was Eileen Albright. "Mr. Thorne, there's a problem," she said, her voice frantic. The man at the ranch. He's not just some bum. He had a sat phone. He made a call. A secure call." Thorne slammed the phone down. The blood drained from his face. The SEAL wasn't alone. He had just called in his team. This was no longer a real estate play. This was now a full-blown containment failure. His employers, the shadowy Aegis group that funded this entire operation, did not tolerate failure. They especially did not tolerate exposure. He was no longer trying to win. He was trying to survive. He picked up his other phone, the one in his desk drawer, the one he was told to use only in a worst-case scenario. He dialed the number. A cold, uninflected voice answered. "Speak. This is Thorne. I have an erase and sanitize situation. It's gotten complicated. We do not like complicated, Marcus. The asset," Thorne stammered. "He's Tier 1 active U.S. Navy. He just lit up his network. They're in my system." "They're in your system." There was a long, terrible silence on the other end. "Understood. The failure is noted. Your authorization is revoked. Sentinel is being activated. They will be on site by 0300. Sentinel?" Thorne had heard the name. A team of ex-Delta and SAS mercenaries. The best, most ruthless cleanup crew money could buy. "You are to be hands-off, Marcus," the voice said. "Do not contact this number again. Do not leave your office. Wait for an escort. The file is now closed." The line went dead. Thorne stared at the phone. He wasn't giving orders anymore. He was now officially just another loose end for Sentinel to tie up. Back at the ranch, the sun was setting. The world was cast in shades of bloody orange and deep purple. Jack was cleaning his knife, waiting. The sat phone on the table buzzed. It was a text from Ghost Thorne Dev Shellco for Aegis Group, YN. Aegis, private mill contractor, DoD Black Ops, bad Albright CPS. 3 unmarked deposits to offshore act, last 6 Maun source, Aegis. Jack felt a cold pit in his stomach. He had the proof. He could prove the conspiracy. But the text also told him who he was fighting. Aegis Group didn't send social workers. He was about to show the text to Sarah when Kodiak, who had been resting, stood up. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stood, a statue of sudden, high-alert tension. He walked to the center of the kitchen, his head high, sniffing the air. Not the outside air. The inside air. "What is it, bud?" Jack whispered. Kodiak walked to the old cold stone fireplace. He sniffed intently at the flue, then looked back at Jack and gave a single, almost silent woof. Jack frowned. He checked the flue. Nothing. Kodiak moved again, this time to a power outlet on the wall near the kitchen table. He pushed his nose against it, then whined low in his throat. Jack's blood ran cold. He pulled his knife and in one move pried the plastic cover from the wall. Tucked behind the 110-volt wiring was a small black device, no bigger than a quarter. A tiny green LED blinked. A listening device. They were in the house, Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "When they cut the phone line," Jack said. But something was wrong. The device was active, but Kodiak wasn't focused on it anymore. The dog bolted to the front window. He didn't look out the window. He looked up toward the high, dark ridgeline a mile away. He stared for a solid 10 seconds, and then a low, deep, chest-rattling growl started, a sound Jack had only heard once before, right before an IED ambush. Jack grabbed his monocular in Sarah's hand, pulling her away from the window. "Get down." He put the monocular to his eye, scanning the ridge. It was dark, too dark. He kept looking, searching for the anomaly. There, a glint. But it wasn't a glint of reflected moonlight. It was a glint that disappeared, a glint of high-end optics being covered by a lens cap. A professional sniper miles away, letting them know he was there. The bug wasn't for Thorne. It was for the Overwatch. They were being watched. They were being hunted. "Sarah," Jack said, his voice deadly calm. "Get Cody, go to the root cellar now." He clicked his tongue. Kodiak was by his side, all pretense of being a pet gone. The professionals had arrived. The root cellar was black, cold, and smelled of damp earth and potatoes. For Sarah and Cody, it was a terrifying prison. For Jack Stone, it was a tactical operations center. He sat on an overturned crate. The iridium sat phone to his ear, a tiny bead of an earpiece in the other. He was perfectly still, his breathing low and regular. The only light was the phone's dim green display, painting his face in ghostly shadow. Kodiak lay at his feet, a 70-pound tripwire, his head up, ears methodically scanning the night. "They're not waiting for 0300. Ghost's voice crackled, digitized and urgent. "The storm's moving in fast and they're using it for cover. I'm tapped into a local weather node. Barometric pressure is dropping like a rock. Wind and rain in 5. How many?" Jack said, his voice a whisper. 6. I got a hit off a sat image 20 mics ago. Black on black, moving in a tactical V. "These are not Thorne's rent-a-cops, Jack. This is Sentinel, Aegis's top-tier cleanup crew. X-Delta, X-Sus. They are not here to negotiate." Sarah, huddled in the corner with Cody under a wool blanket, felt her heart stop. 6 of them? Jack ignored her, his focus absolute. "Ghost, talk to me." "They're good," Ghost said, the sound of rapid typing underpinning his words. "They're running a standard breach and clear. They'll split. 4 on the house, Alpha, to neutralize the primary threat. 2 on the flank, Bravo, to cut off escape. They'll be on you in 3 minutes. How's the new guy?" "New guy? The canine, can he work?" Jack looked at Kodiak. The dog was already staring at the cellar door, sensing the change in the air. "He's not new. He's the only one here who's not." "Good, because you're 1 man against 6 Tier 1 operators. You can't win a fair fight, Stone." "Good," Jack said, closing the phone. "I don't do fair." He turned to Sarah. The time for comfort was over. "Sarah, the land. You said your husband's family dug this." "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "My husband's great-grandfather. He was looking for silver. These cellars? They connect to the old shafts. Shafts, plural?" Jack's eyes lit up. "He told me never to go in them. They're unstable. They're all over the north pasture. He used them to move feed to the barn in deep winter under the snow. Show me." She pointed to the back of the cellar, to a wall of old timber. "It goes to the barn. And another one, it goes to the well house. But Jack, they're..." "Perfect," Jack said. He looked at the hard-packed dirt floor. "They're a subway system." He grabbed an old pickaxe from the wall. This wasn't a defense. It was an ambush. The first crack of thunder split the sky, and with it the rain came, a horizontal, wind-driven deluge. "They're here," Ghost's voice said in his earpiece. "Alpha team is at the front porch. Bravo is moving wide toward the barn." "Copy," Jack whispered. Outside, 0248. Am, the Sentinel team leader, Wraith, gave the hand signal. 4 men stacked on the front door. 2. Bravo team peeled off, their NVGs cutting the rain-soaked darkness into a green digital landscape. They were professionals. They moved like water. Wraith didn't bother picking the lock. His breacher placed a small C4 charge. The explosion was dull, heavy, swallowed by the storm. "Go, go, go!" Alpha team poured into the ranch house. A 4-man hurricane of black armor and suppressed weapons. "Clear! Clear! Living room clear! Kitchen clear!" Wraith stood in the kitchen. Empty, coffee cups on the table. A dog's bowl. He hit his comms. "Bravo, status?" "Moving on the barn," a voice replied. No movement. "Target is not in the primary," Wraith said, annoyed. "Find the cellar." "They're rats in a box." "The tunnels." Air 249. Jack was not in the box. He was in the walls. He had smashed through the old timber, leading Sarah and Cody into the black, claustrophobic tunnel. It smelled of cold earth and history. "Ghost, I need eyes on Alpha," Jack whispered, his phone to his mouth. "They're in the kitchen, tossing the place. They're looking for the cellar entrance." "Good, let 'em." Jack turned to Sarah. "This leads to the barn?" "Yes." "Stay left." Jack, Sarah, Cody, and Kodiak were moving under the feet of their hunters. "Bravo team is at the barn," Ghost said. 2 men. "They're checking your truck. They think you fled." Jack stopped. He could hear boots on the wooden floorboards above his head. He looked at Kodiak. The dog was rigid, staring at the ceiling, a low rumble in his chest. Jack put his hand on the dog's neck, a silent "stand by." "Sarah," he whispered. "The floor. How thick?" Just the boards. David, Jack," Ghost's voice was sharp. "Bravo is splitting. 1 is holding security on the barn. The other is coming around the back. He's going to find the cellar's outside door. He's going to find you." This was the key moment. The flanker. If he caught them, they were trapped in the tunnel. Kodiak. Jack whispered. He pointed to a spot on the tunnel ceiling where rain was dripping through. He gave a sharp two-finger up signal. Kodiak didn't hesitate. He coiled his powerful haunches and launched himself vertically. He smashed through the rotted floorboards, exploding out of a pile of old hay like a landmine. The Bravo team member, Ripper, never had a chance. He was scanning the house, his rifle at the ready. He heard the sound, turned, and was met by 70 pounds of focused airborne fury. Kodiak hit him chest high, a man-stopper strike. The man's rifle discharged into the rain, a useless pft. The dog wasn't mauling. He was securing. He had the man's weapon arm in his jaws, a crushing, bone-deep grip. Jack was through the hole a second later. The other Bravo team member, Scout, heard the shot. He spun, raising his rifle. But Jack was already on him. Jack didn't use a gun. He used the pickaxe. The handle, a sharp, brutal strike to the man's ribs, followed by a strike to the back of the knee. The man crumpled. Jack disarmed him, zip-tied his hands, and had him on his face in the mud in under 3 seconds. He turned to Kodiak. Out, Kodiak released the arm. Down. The dog lay on the man, a low, constant growl, pinning him to the ground. 2 down. The house. Air 253. Am. Bravo. Bravo, talk to me! Wraith yelled into his comms. Nothing but static, sir. His Alpha Team breacher said. The cellar. It's empty, but there's a tunnel. A cold dread hit Wraith. They weren't the hunters. They were in the trap. Out! Wraith yelled. Back to the truck! Exfil now. Alpha Team bolted from the house, running into the driving rain. Their professionalism shattered, replaced by the panicked scramble of a compromised mission. They ran for their high-tech truck and found Jack Stone leaning against it, his arms crossed. You're late, Jack said. Wraith raised his rifle. Don't, Ghost's voice said. Not in Jack's ear. It came from everywhere. From the speakers of the Sentinel team's truck, from the radio on Wraith's own chest. Ghost had hacked their entire network. Jack, Ghost's voice said, now just in his earpiece. The 3 in front of you are just grunts. But Wraith, the leader? He's the one you want. He's the one with the direct link to Aegis. Wraith, a professional to the end, ignored the voice and lunged at Jack. This was not a movie fight. It was a vicious short-circuiting of the human body. Jack met his lunge, redirecting the man's energy, using his own knife hand to strike the nerve cluster in Wraith's neck. A brachial stun. Wraith's entire body went numb. He collapsed at Jack's feet, his rifle clattering. The other 3 soldiers stopped dead. They were looking at their 2 Bravo team members being herded forward by Kodiak. They were looking at their leader, paralyzed in the mud. Jack hadn't fired a shot. He had used the terrain, his tech, his dog, and his hands. It was a complete tactical victory. Jack pulled the sat phone from Wraith's vest, a piece of tech far superior to his own. He looked at the 6 captured mercenaries, disarmed and defeated. Ghost, Jack said, his voice heavy. We're clear. There was a pause. The rain began to ease. About that, Ghost's voice came back, and the relaxed post-victory tone was gone. I'm looking at the Aegis payroll, Jack, the real one. And Sentinel. They were the diversion. They just activated their cleaner, a single operative. He's already in state. He's their real solution. Jack looked at the captured men. They were just a speed bump. And he'd just announced his presence to the real threat. The driving rain was the only sound for a full minute. It washed the mud from the faces of the 6 captured Sentinel operators, who were now zip-tied and sitting in a miserable line against the barn wall. The victory was absolute, yet it felt hollow, cold. Jack stood over them, the tactical sat phone he'd taken from Wraith in his hand. Sarah and Cody had emerged from the tunnel, shaken but safe. Kodiak, his duty done, was in a watch position, his eyes fixed on the prisoners. You're sloppy, Jack said to Wraith. Wraith, the team leader, spat a mix of rain and blood onto the ground. He looked up and he wasn't scared. He was amused. Sloppy? Wraith laughed, a harsh barking sound. Son, we were sloppy because we thought you were a one-man band. You're not. You're networked. You have an asset. He nodded toward the phone. That's not a win. That's a death sentence. Who is Aegis? Jack demanded. Aegis isn't a who, man. It's a what? It's a line item in a black budget. It's the ghost in the machine that cleans up the messes the government can't or won't. And you're their janitors, Jack said. We're the surgeons. Wraith corrected, his voice dropping. We're the ones they send to cut out the tumor. But when the surgery fails, when we fail, he looked at his captured team. Aegis has a policy for that. They don't tolerate failure. They don't accept captured, they only sterilize. Like, you didn't just beat us, you idiot. You just made us, this ranch, that woman, and that kid, part of the same contamination. A cold understanding dawned on Jack. You're not afraid of me. You're afraid of them. You're damn right I am, Wraith said. This whole operation, the minerals, the land, none of it matters now. The primary objective has changed. To what? Sarah asked, her voice small, stepping from the shadows. Wraith's cynical gaze softened just a fraction. To you, ma'am. To him, to us. To Marcus Thorne. To anyone who knows this file exists. The new objective is containment, full erasure. No witnesses. Jack. Ghost's voice crackled in his earpiece, sharp and terrified. Jack, you need to hear this. I've been digging. The Aegis file on this op. It just got flagged Echo Black. It's a burn notice. They're cutting Thorne loose. Who's they? Jack asked, his eyes still locked on Wraith. Not who, Ghost said. What? Aegis isn't run by a person. It's run by a board of directors. The big boss isn't a man in a chair. It's a committee of ex-Intel chiefs and defense industry billionaires, and they just voted to clean the slate. 100 miles away in his glass office in Jackson, Marcus Thorne was pacing. He had been told to wait for an escort. He'd been waiting for 2 hours, his scotch untouched, his stomach a knot of acidic fear. He knew Sentinel had been deployed. He knew the deadline of 300 had passed. He had heard nothing. His calls to the Aegis liaison line went to a dead-air voicemail. He was locked out. The polished steel elevator doors in his private lobby dinged. Thorne spun, a wave of relief washing over him. Finally, he breathed. What took you so? The words died in his throat. The man who stepped out was not Wraith. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't wearing armor or tactical gear. He was wearing a simple, perfectly tailored gray suit. He was of average height, average build, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant. He looked forgettable. And he was carrying a small, hard-sided briefcase, Mr. Thorne, the man said. His voice was flat with no discernible accent. You've had a difficult evening. Who are you? Thorne demanded, his fear returning, colder this time. Where is Sentinel? Is it done? Is the ranch clear? Sentinel has been compromised, the man said, as if discussing a poor quarterly report. He set his briefcase on Thorne's glass desk and opened it. Inside there was no laptop. Just foam containing a single customized syringe and a small silenced pistol. Thorne's blood ran cold. Compromised? What does that mean? It means, the man said, picking up the syringe with a latex-gloved hand, that your operation was a failure. And Aegis does not abide failure. You were the mid-level boss, Marcus. Your job was to handle this. You escalated a simple land grab into a Tier 1 incident. You exposed the board. I can fix it, Thorne stammered, backing away. Just tell them I'll handle the seal. You won't be handling anything. The man, the cleaner, moved with a speed that was utterly at odds with his bland appearance. Thorne tried to bolt for the door, but the cleaner was already there. It wasn't a fight. It was a process. The cleaner caught Thorne's arm, spun him around, and plunged the needle into his neck, right into the carotid artery. Thorne's eyes went wide. He gasped, but the air wouldn't come. He clawed at his neck, looking at the cleaner with sheer, unadulterated terror. It's just an air embolism, Marcus, the cleaner said, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. He held Thorne upright, steadying him. You've been under a lot of stress. You're a high-strung executive. You'll be found in the morning. A tragic stroke. A brain aneurysm. The coroner will confirm. He held Thorne until the man's struggles ceased, his body went limp and his eyes glazed over. He gently lowered the body to the floor, arranging it behind the desk in a plausible position. He wiped the desk, the elevator button, and the door handle. He packed his briefcase. He looked around the immaculate office, a ghost evaluating his work. He was in and out in under 3 minutes. Ghost, Jack said, his voice grim. What else? Jack, this is the one. The cleaner. They call him the janitor. He's the one they send when the problem is us. When the problem is professionals. He's not a soldier. He's an apex predator. He's been credited with the... Ghost stopped. Jack heard a sharp inhale. Ghost? What is it?
Oh God, Jack.
I'm monitoring local dispatch. Jackson PD. They just got a 911 call from a security guard. A medical emergency at the Thorne Developments building. Jack's stomach dropped. He's already started. He's not coming for you next, Jack, Ghost said, his voice strained. He's cleaning the whole board. He just took out Marcus Thorne. He's already on his way. He's not coming with a team, Jack. He's coming with a scalpel. Wraith, who had been listening, let out a low, humorless laugh. You see? Wraith said, his eyes filled with a new, desperate fear. He's not coming to fight us. He's coming to erase us. And he'll use you, he looked at Sarah, to do it. He won't make a sound. He won't break a window. He'll just get in, and the last thing you'll ever see is the accountant. You gotta let us go, Stone. He's coming for all of us. It's the only chance we have. Jack looked at the 6 captured mercenaries. He looked at Sarah holding Cody. He looked at Kodiak. His victory had lasted 10 minutes. And now, the real monster was on his way. The cold High Plains rain had tapered off, leaving the world in a state of dripping, sodden silence. The 6 Sentinel mercenaries were a picture of defeated macho bluster. Their high-tech gear mud-caked and useless, their hands bound by their own zip ties. I can't let you go, Jack said to Wraith, his voice flat. But I can't leave you here. He'll kill us all, Stone, Wraith snarled, his voice a low hiss. The janitor, he doesn't take prisoners. He just balances the books. Then you're a liability I have to contain. Jack jerked his head toward the root cellar. Get them in. All of them. He couldn't trust them, but he couldn't execute them. The cellar was the only tactical solution. He and Sarah, with Kodiak providing a very pointed, toothy escort, herded the 6 trained killers into the damp earthen darkness. Jack secured the heavy outer door with a logging chain and a padlock from the barn. They were off the board. Jack, what now? Sarah's voice was a frayed nerve end. We won. Didn't we? We won the battle, Jack said, his eyes scanning the tree line, the darkness that was no longer empty. He's coming for the war. He's not Sentinel. He won't be loud. He won't use a team. Jack. Ghost's voice crackled in his earpiece, the one he'd taken from Wraith. The tech was better, the signal cleaner. I've been running scans, nothing. No thermal signatures, no vehicles, no comms. This guy is a true ghost. He's not in the system. He's analog. That's because he's already here, Jack said. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The cleaner hadn't driven up. He hadn't landed. He had been here all along. He had watched the fight with Sentinel. He had let Jack win just to see what he was capable of. We go back to the house, Jack said, his voice hard. We turn on the lights. We make coffee. We act at normal. What? Jack, that's insane. It's a lure. It's the only way. I have to draw him out. He's a stalker. He's waiting for us to be weak. We have to give him a target. He looked at her, his eyes cold. He thinks he's the predator. Let's make him the prey. Kodiak, sensing the shift in his handler, stuck close, his body language no longer that of a guard but of a hunter. They entered the small ranch house. The power was still out. Jack flipped a breaker, but the grid was dead. The fight had been too much. Sarah lit a battery-powered camping lantern, placing it on the kitchen table. It cast a harsh white circle of light, leaving the corners of the room in deep, impenetrable shadow. Cody, Sarah breathed, her first thought. She moved toward his bedroom. No, Jack said, grabbing her arm. Together. Kodiak Farouse. Forward. Kodiak moved ahead of them, his nose working. He entered Cody's room, sniffed the bed where the boy was still fast asleep, exhausted from the terror. The dog circled the room, gave a low woof, and came back out. All clear. They returned to the kitchen. The false security was palpable. The storm was over. The bad men were locked up. Sarah's hands were shaking as she tried to light the propane stove for the coffee. He's not coming, Jack, she whispered, a desperate hope in her voice. He must have gone. He took out Thorne. Maybe that's all he needed to do. No, Jack said. He was standing in the center of the room, his borrowed M4 rifle held at a low, ready position. He's... Kodiak growled. It was a sound Jack had never heard from him. It wasn't a warning growl. It wasn't an aggression growl. It was a confused growl. The dog was standing near the fireplace, sniffing. Then he backed away, moving toward the pantry, his head high, tasting the air. Ghost, I have movement, Jack whispered. Negative, Jack. Ghost's voice was frantic in his ear. There's nothing. The perimeter is clean. I'm watching thermal. There's no one. A man's voice, as calm and dry as old paper, came from the shadows by the back door. That's because I've been in the attic for the last 3 hours. Mr. Stone, your ghost is looking in all the wrong places. The man stepped into the light. He was exactly as Ghost had implied. Average, forgettable, dressed in a simple dark rain jacket, his hands empty. He looked like an insurance adjuster. Jack swung the M4 up. Don't move. The cleaner smiled, a thin, tight expression. A man of your training. You should know. The threat is never the one you're pointing the gun at. The pantry door on the other side of the room burst open. It wasn't another man. It was Cody. He was in his pajamas, his eyes wide with terror, a hand clamped over his mouth. The cleaner had a gun to the boy's head. No. Jack's mind reeled. The man by the door? He wasn't. A simple old-world misdirection, said the real cleaner, the one holding the child. He too was in an identical rain jacket. The man by the door was a distraction, a high-end remote-controlled audio decoy. The janitor isn't one man, Mr. Stone, it's a concept. Let him go, Jack said. His voice a razor's edge, his rifle now aimed at the man holding the boy. No, I don't think I will, the cleaner said. He calmly pulled the boy back. His pistol pressed to Cody's temple. Sarah, my God, what? Sarah was frozen, her hand over her mouth, a silent scream. It's a very simple exchange, Mr. Stone, the cleaner said. You've cost my employers a great deal of money. You, your dog, the woman, the boy, and the 6 idiots in the cellar. It's an unacceptable liability. You, Sarah whispered, her voice full of venom. You're the one. You killed David, it was you. The cleaner actually looked surprised. Your husband? Oh no, that was a local matter. That was Thorne. A clumsy, passionate little murder. I'm not a murderer, Mrs. Miller. I'm a hygienist. I'm here to clean up the mess. He had Sarah. He knew he had her. Now place your weapon on the floor, or the boys. Accident will be the first item on my list. Jack was in a perfect stalemate. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't move. The man was a professional. The distance was too great for a disarm and the target was too small. Kodiak was a statue of coiled muscle, a low growl vibrating in his chest. And the animal, the cleaner said, his eyes flicking to Kodiak for the first time. Put it down now. What? Jack said. Shoot it, the cleaner clarified, his voice flat. It's an unpredictable variable. I don't like variables. Shoot your dog or I shoot the child. You have 3 seconds, this was the end. The man was a genius. He wasn't just killing Jack. He was breaking him first. 2, the cleaner said. Jack raised his rifle. Sarah let out a sob. Jack, no. Jack looked at Kodiak. Kodiak, he said, his voice thick. 1, the cleaner said, tensing, ready for the shot. Jack's hand, which was on the rifle's foregrip, gave a signal. It wasn't a point. It was a simple 2-finger tap against the cold steel, a signal they had practiced 1,000 times. Os, release, but not for a toy. It was the signal for a weapon drop. Kodiak was looking at Jack. The instant he saw the signal, his eyes shifted. He wasn't looking at the man. He was looking at the gun, but the cleaner was too smart. He was waiting for the dog to attack him. The signal wasn't for him. Jack looked the cleaner in the eye. Okay, and he gave a short, sharp verbal command. Take! The cleaner tensed, expecting the dog to lunge. He didn't. Kodiak launched himself, not at the cleaner, but at Cody. In a move of shocking, counterintuitive speed, Kodiak bit the child. He clamped his jaws with perfect, trained precision onto Cody's shoulder and pulled. Cody screamed. The cleaner, shocked by the bizarre action, stumbled, his focus broken. The dog had attacked the hostage, but it wasn't an attack. It was an extraction. Kodiak pulled the boy out of the cleaner's grip, breaking the line of fire. The cleaner's pistol was now aimed at an empty space. He had 1 second to reacquire his target. It was 1 second too long. Jack didn't fire. He moved. He crossed the 10 feet of kitchen in a single bound step. The cleaner tried to swing his pistol, but Jack was already inside his guard. Jack's rifle came up, not to shoot, but to strike. The butt of the rifle hit the cleaner's wrist, shattering the bone and sending the pistol skittering into the shadows. The cleaner, even in agony, was a professional. He went for the knife on his belt. Jack was faster. He dropped the rifle and delivered a single, devastating palm-heel strike to the man's jaw. The cleaner's head snapped back and he collapsed, unconscious before he hit the floor. The entire exchange, from the take command to the final blow, had taken less than 2 seconds. The kitchen was silent, but for the sound of Sarah rushing to her son, and Kodiak, who was already licking Cody's face, his tail thumping, his work complete. Jack stood over the unconscious cleaner, his chest heaving, his hands shaking. He had been beaten, he had been checkmated, and his partner, the unpredictable variable, had just changed the game. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by 3 sounds: the click of a zip tie being pulled tight around the cleaner's wrists, the sharp, ragged breathing of Jack Stone, and the quiet, hiccuping sobs of Cody, who was buried in his mother's arms. Kodiak, his mission complete, stood panting over the unconscious cleaner, a single drop of the man's blood on his black muzzle, where the man's flailing hand had connected with a tooth. It's okay, baby," Sarah was whispering, her hands running through Cody's hair. "He's okay. You're okay." She looked at the boy's shoulder. The bite from Kodiak hadn't even broken the skin on his thick pajamas. It was a pressure hold, a takedown designed to move, not to maim. She looked at Jack, who was securing the cleaner's ankles. Her eyes were filled with a terror that was slowly, miraculously being replaced by awe. "The dog," she breathed. He knew. "He did what he was trained to do," Jack said, his voice rough. He pulled the man's earpiece from his own ear and spoke into the comms. "Ghost, we have a package. The janitor is secure. The house is clear. I have 6 problems in the root cellar." The reply was immediate, and Ghost's voice was no longer frantic. It was cold. "Copy, package, stand by. I'm routing the call." "Routing it where?" "We need the state police." "We're past the state police, Jack," Ghost said. "When Aegis activated a janitor, they kicked the hornet's nest. I'm not just a hacker, I'm a patriot. I've been feeding this entire file for the last 30 minutes to the only person I trust at the Bureau. The FBI? Special Agent Rostova, Rocky Mountain Division. She's been building a case against Aegis for 2 years. You just gave her the entire Rosetta Stone. They're already in the air. ETA, 15 minutes. 15? Jack looked at the unconscious man. She's not just coming for him. She's coming for us. No, Jack, Ghost said. She's coming for them. You and the family are witnesses. I've made edits to the file. You're listed as a confidential informant who was on site by request. You're clean. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked at the chaos of his kitchen, the broken pantry door, the overturned chairs, the high-end assassin zip-tied on the floor. He walked over to Sarah and Cody. He knelt, his knees cracking. He looked at Cody. "He bit me," Cody whispered, his eyes wide. "He saved you," Jack corrected, his voice gentle. He put his hand on Kodiak's head. "He's trained to protect. He saw the threat to you and he got you out of the line of fire. He's a hero, Cody." Cody's fear finally broke and he reached out a small trembling hand, resting it on Kodiak's snout. The dog, in a rare break from his professional demeanor, licked the boy's hand. The first sound was a low thwack, thwack, thwack from the distance. "They're early," Jack said. Standing, the sound wasn't a helicopter. It was a fleet of them. 3 black unmarked Sikorsky helicopters landed in Sarah's north pasture, their searchlights cutting the pre-dawn darkness. At the same time, a column of black SUVs, their lights flashing blue and red, came storming up the gravel driveway. This wasn't just a raid. It was an invasion. A woman in a dark blue FBI windbreaker, her face hard and no-nonsense, stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was Agent Rostova. She and 2 agents came to the porch. Jack met them at the door, his hands in the air. Rostova didn't even look at him. Her eyes went straight to Kodiak. "Good dog," she said. Then she looked at Jack. "Mr. Stone, I'm Agent Rostova. My associate Ghost tells me you have some trash for us to take out." "It's in the kitchen," Jack said. "And the cellar." The next hour was a blur of professional federal efficiency. The Sentinel team was extracted from the cellar. Their protests about rights met with the stony silence of agents who held jurisdiction over national security. The cleaner was bagged, tagged, and loaded onto a helicopter, a John Doe ghost being swallowed by the very system he served. Agent Rostova stood with Jack on the porch as the sun began to break, painting the Wind River Range in shades of pink and gold. "Aegis Group is done," she said. "The warrants are being served in D.C. and Langley as we speak. This," she motioned to the ranch, "this was the linchpin. That core sample you found? It's the key. You're a witness, Mr. Stone. You and the Millers will be debriefed. And then you'll be free. What about the ranch? Sarah asked, stepping out, holding a fresh mug of coffee for Jack. Rostova smiled, a rare, thin smile. Mrs. Miller, according to the confidential file that was just leaked, your husband was a patriot who was murdered by a rogue government contractor. The mineral rights? Aegis never had them. They're yours. You're about to be a very, very secure landowner. She tipped her head to Jack. Thank you for your service, Mr. Stone, again. And just like that, they were gone. The helicopters, the SUVs, the darkness, they were gone. Time jump. 2 months later. Ext, Lone Ridge Ranch. Day the sound wasn't of gunfire. It was the sound of hammers on nails, the smell of fresh-cut lumber and barbecue smoke. The ranch was alive. Dozens of trucks, local, not government, were parked in the pasture. The townspeople of Lone Ridge, the ones who had whispered about Sarah's paranoia, were there. They were rebuilding her barn. They were installing new windows. They were bringing casseroles and pies. It was a welcome home party. It was an apology. It was a community rebuilding itself. Jack Stone, dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, was hammering a loose step on the front porch. He was no longer a visitor. Cody, who had lost his haunted, too-old look, ran by laughing. Kodiak, fetch! He threw a new bright red ball. Kodiak, who was off-leash and not in a tactical harness, bounded after it, his tail wagging, a picture of a normal, happy dog. Cody ran up to the porch, holding something behind his back. Hey, Jack, he said. Hey, Cody. Cody brought his hands around. It was a new dog collar. It wasn't black, tactical nylon. It was thick, brown, hand-tooled leather. Burned into the side was one word, Kodiak. And on the back, Cody had, in his own messy handwriting, scrawled his name and address. I made it, Cody said, his voice proud. In town because, you know. So he's not just a soldier. He's ours. Jack felt a tightening in his chest, a sensation he couldn't identify. He nodded, his throat thick. Go give it to him, kid. Cody ran off the porch, knelt by the big Malinois and fumbled with the buckle, swapping the military hardware for the piece of home. Jack watched. Sarah came up behind him, handing him a glass of lemonade. He's good with him, she said, her voice quiet. Yeah, Jack said. He is. They stood in silence, watching the town work, watching the boy play. The Lone Ridge was no longer a place of isolation. It was a sanctuary. Jack, Sarah said, yeah? Thank you. For coming home? Jack looked at her, at the peace in her eyes. He looked at the mountains. He looked at the man he was becoming, a man who fixed things instead of breaking them. He turned his gaze to the yard. Kodiak, wearing his new bright collar, had trotted up to the porch. He didn't take an alert position. He didn't scan the perimeter. He let out a long, happy, dog-like sigh and lay down at Jack's feet. He put his heavy head on his paws, and for the first time in his entire life, the warrior dog went to sleep, a fade to black. Taunzi, note to the audience, thank you so much for following the story of Lone Ridge, and for joining Jack and Kodiak on this journey from the battlefield to the home front. We've seen them face down corporate armies, government killers, and their own pasts. These stories are about more than just action. They're about loyalty, the unbreakable bond between a man and his K9, and the idea that true courage isn't just about fighting, it's about protecting. It's been an honor to tell their story. But now we want to hear from you. Our question for you is, what part of Kodiak's non-lethal heroism, using his training to save a life, rather than just take one, resonated the most with you, and why? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you again for watching.